And even the face of the god relates to something that they consider to be a face that's similar to them in their culture. And that's why you see the faces of the gods varying, either according to an animal or according to a human, according to the distinct cultures, depending on who you're dealing with. But if you say light principles come before any formation, then initially the God itself is the idea. Now everybody has a God. That makes nobody exempt from that particular principle in itself, because if we say, yeah, the idea or the objective is, hey, I need to become a lawyer, I want to become a doctor, then that becomes the God in itself, because the idea itself is what you begin to worship and dedicate all your deeds and devote your thought and your members to. And worship just consists of what? How you dedicate the deeds itself to that particular objective. How you facilitate the means of being able to obtain that objective. So the principle is the idea. The God is the idea. And how that idea is formed within any particular individual's mind based on either indoctrination, traditional concepts or conventional concepts or whatever, then that's what's determining God to this particular person. And then the terminology that the mind gets conditioned to. And this is what it restricts the mind to being able to rationalize some other aspects to what may be involved in that. And that's why they'll speak so adamantly in partiality about one concept, because they'll say, well, if you don't say this name, or if you don't use this term, then you're not talking about what it is that I'm dealing with. Because the mind has been trained to only hear that term. But the term itself is not determining always the associative operation. We're looking for the operation of light. The operation is what determines what the God is. That's how you get into these numbers. When you get into the values of the numbers, or when you get into the operation, you're dealing with numbers. Dealing with measurements of light. Because that's what's determining. Regardless of it's almost like a synonym, where a word may be formed different by the sound and the look of it, but the value and the essence of what it is, it can be the same because of the value, because of its essence. So what happens is it'll cause them to define these things differently because of what they see in expression. And you have people that try to determine what something is just by appearance only, and not by its essence. And that type of approach is what causes that partiality, and it causes the injustice and not to be fair or an imbalance in your interpretation. So we're talking about, like, our intention is to be fair. Our intention is to be accurate. As far as like what we say is, or what we come to understand is what it is that unites all these belief systems, and how, no matter what, because the anatomical construct of each individual is pretty much the same, unless there's some malformity within the anatomy. But you're still using the same senses as a means to access or to come into contact with your deity. So with that in mind, then you can tell, we can say that actually the God is still getting formed from those houses, or is still getting formed from those particular departments within a person's anatomy. Their embodiment, and first and foremost, their mind. The body itself is an offshoot or an offspring of the mind. It's just connected to the mind, but the main construct, or the main base, or the main operative manager or management of that, or the priest of the body, is the mind. And how somebody processes or assess anything is by those thoughts. So when we talk about light principles, it's how you process a thought according to what it is, your references that you've been conditioned to process something by. So if I say certain things, you're going to filter what I'm saying based on whatever it is that you've accumulated up to this point, through study, through tradition, and whatever the case is. And a lot of people who may not consider themselves, say, okay, well, I just believe this because my mom told me. I believe this because my dad told me. And those are just concepts that have been passed down, and you just participate in something routinely. You're not really studying to find out how accurate it is or how, on point it is. The point is to carry on tradition. You know. But when you get into this, when we say, we're definitely having a concern about the well-being and the productive nature, and also determining what our point is of being here. What is the purpose of us being here? Is it just to follow suit? Or is it for each individual to define themselves and find out what their full potential is? So, maybe, if this place is just a restriction, or even a premature state of what you can fully become, this is a way to come to find out what that is and how to achieve your fullest state. When you talk about heaven or immortality, even in the biblical sense, you say that, okay, the point was to transcend mortality and enter into immortality. A lot of times that gets overlooked because the concentration is always to try to take advantage of the time here and gain possessions of physical things at this point. But what happens here is that the possession possesses the possessor. And then it prevents, it restricts, or gives a congestion to the full status of what they were to become. Because of where the focus is now, and the devotions have been made to the possession or to the object itself, instead of concentrating on the full potential that somebody has internally.
What's that line where it says, man came the whole world but lost himself or lost his soul? How did that line go? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. But the loss of the soul is a detour. The soul can't be lost. It can be misplaced in the sense where you detour from path. Okay. Because the concept of soul is always in place, but I'm saying in the sense that when somebody gets kind of cloudy as far as what it is that their intentions or what the purpose of even being here or what they're supposed to be developing. Now you can get distracted from that because of your concentration. What they consider lust is just a partiality in sight. Not always associated with a sensual, sexual deviation. It's any time you're seeing some impartiality where the mind is just, or the sight or the perception is drawn into one aspect of something and they can't fully see what else is involved with that. So that's what will happen. A lot of times the concentration will get drawn into, well, I need to concentrate on this job, I need to concentrate on this female, I need to concentrate on this car, I need to, whatever the case is. When you get drawn into one aspect of something without seeing the full perspective of what it is, then that's just what causes what we're talking about when we're talking about lust. We're talking about partiality of sight, partiality of perception. So the intention is to try to gain a fuller perception of what's going on. More angles and degrees of being able to see in order to be just. Because this also describes to you what it means to lie. A lie is an incompletion of truth, obviously. That means that something hasn't been fully been presented in order to determine the truth. And then it's not always intentional, but sometimes people will speak so strongly about something that they feel is the truth, when the truth consists of the entirety of something. The full measurement of something. And if that hadn't come, then you haven't arrived at the truth. You're still in the process of developing what that is. So when we talk about, like, at this season of Thanksgiving, we're talking about the intention of drawing up the full perspective of thought. And then coming to an acknowledgement or a consciousness of what has been received internally. Because perceptions will fade. That's not, nobody's going against the point of somebody coming to an acknowledgement that they've been assisted in certain circumstances and they've received certain things within these circumstances that they consider to be challenging. And that's what they'll call themselves, like, okay, Thanksgiving. They're thankful for that assistance.